Now you may have noticed that I have talked about all the Guardians except for one. I didn't even mention his title in the other journals. I wanted to save him for last, because I knew he would be the hardest to talk about. The original leader of the Guardians of the Multiverse, before my brother that is. The strongest out of all of us, and the one wielding arguably the most powerful key. KUVERA, the King of Reality. Unlike the rest of us, KUVERA was born in the Crimson Kingdom. In fact, he was actually Yartage's general when we first met him. He was quiet and rarely ever spoke to us unless it was to either teach Yartage's soldiers about magic or to set up a plan to take down a possible threat. Like True Fear. He wouldn't flat out ignore us, but it was obvious that he wasn't a fan of social interaction. Yartage told us why. You see, years before any of us discovered the power of magic, KUVERA was still a soldier in training. The general at this point in time was some girl. From what I was told, she was a woman who was strong, brave, and would have been the perfect guardian. As KUVERA went up the ranks, him and this woman gained a special bond. They felt something for each other, but they were never able to say it, as this bond would be broken very soon. You see, at this point in the timeline, the Crimson Kingdom was at war with the Ever-Neon Kingdom. During their last battle, KUVERA had to witness the woman he loved be shot to death by opposing forces. From what I was told, it was a pretty gruesome sight. She was filled with bullets and wasn't even recognizable anymore. After this, Yartage was able to set up a peace treaty and the war had finally ended, even if the Ever-Neon Kingdom still had sour feelings towards our own. But KUVERA suffered the worst pain of all. Even with that thick purple armor, KUVERA couldn't withstand a broken heart. He stopped talking to others outright. The king was only able to change this when he made KUVERA his new general, but he was still suffering. He remained like this for as long as we knew him, even after he was given the key of reality by the woman in black. Things took a strange turn when Yartage passed away. The reality of eternal youth hit us hard. It didn't matter who we would meet or share any kind of bond with. They would grow old and die as we'd stay the same age. I guess KUVERA couldn't stand seeing us in the same despair he was going through, as this is when he chose to become the leader of the Guardians. He communicated a lot more with us, but it was still very obvious that he wasn't completely into it. This would go on for a few thousand years. The Crimson Kingdom has become a lot more advanced since then, but the hotel has always remained the same, minus a few upgrades made by both the engineer and the researcher. And things got a lot better then too. Most of us were able to accept how things were going to be and made the most of it, with the exception being, you guessed it, the King of Reality himself. But what happened? Why did the butler become the new leader of the Guardians? And why is it so hard for me to mention my old comrade? Well, it was around 500 or so years ago. A piece of True Fear was somehow able to seep out of the door, and that's the problem with doors. They can never be completely sealed. It just takes one seam for a shadow to slip out. We're not sure why this shadow attacked then of all times. After all, it had already been thousands of years since True Fear was locked away. Nonetheless, his shadow landed inside the Red Room. We discovered long before the shadows escaped that the Red Room was made to keep people away from True Fear's door. As the door was made to lock away the corrupt True God, the Red Room was a safety measure to make sure people would stay away. This means the Red Room isn't strong enough to keep True Fear contained. The shadow distorted a hole in the bottom of the Red Cube. It slithered down the face of the hotel. The security system the researcher made activated, from his blasters to the engineer's stone soldier statues. Though they couldn't even land a hit as the shadows distorted all of them beyond the point of recognition. This is when I came to the hotel and saw everything. I didn't think this day would ever come. I'll be honest, I was nervous and scared. I've tried to take down the shadow with everything I've got, but nothing was working. My gravity manipulating abilities were the only thing that could work, and even then the shadow was able to break free. The shadow charged right at me, going through my body, though I suffered no damage or distortion, but my clothes had changed. My jacket sleeves changed in size as one grew longer and the other shrunk as my shirt became ripped. Thankfully, my mask wasn't affected, but this made me realize something. True Fear's distortion can affect sentient beings, or at least the shadow's version of it. If that wasn't the case, then I wouldn't have survived. I had a short breath of relief until I realized something was missing. The shadow wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to take my key, and it succeeded. At this moment, the other Guardians arrived. The engineer blasted the shadow as he scolded me for letting the slithering darkness take my key. The maiden tried to freeze him while nervously reassuring me that they'll get it back, but the shadow dodged every shard of ice. The messenger tried to push down the shadow with his wind and was able to bring it to ground level, but that's it. The Juggernaut took control and struck open a cavern in the crust, at which the captain used her waves to push it down further, but the slippery thing was able to break free. The knight used his weapon to try and strike the shadow down, but he missed and hit the hotel. This being tried to grab it with his centipede-like body, but this wasn't any ordinary shadow, and he was knocked out in the process. The protector caught the being as the Reaper attempted to slash at it and take its life with no prevail. The researcher charged in, shouting at the shadow while firing at him with his new blaster. Nothing seemed to be working, though. We were at a standstill. Granted, it was better than how it was back then when we faced a full True Fear, but this still wasn't good. For all we know, that thing probably was able to grab more keys. My brother, the Butler of Time, arrived and asked if my gravity powers could affect the shadow. I told him yes, but not much. He asked me to try and bring that thing down, and I had no reason not to trust my own brother, so I quickly tried to push that monster down. I gave it my all, and I guess I caught it by surprise as it started to crash to the ground. My brother told me to open a black hole, and as soon as the shadow went through, to open a second one parallel from the last portal, shooting the shadow upward. I looked up to see him. KUVERA falling at great speeds towards the shadow. He most likely took a leap from the top of the hotel. He pulled out his signature sword called Repeated Sins, Forgotten Virtues, and sliced the shadow into pieces. My key flew out of its body, and I ran as fast as I could to catch it. The other pieces tried to swarm towards me, but KUVERA did something none of us were expecting. A symbol identical to the one on the hotel formed over top of him as he pulled out the key of reality. It began to light up, and the separated pieces began to be drawn into it. The crazy bastard. KUVERA knew he couldn't kill the shadow. If that was the case, then the Reaper would have already succeeded. He used a key to imprison it instead. KUVERA slowly descended to the ground as we all ran to check if he was okay. He was fine, but what he said next would surprise us all. This is the moment everything changed. I knew there was no way to truly kill the shadow. A small piece of true fear it may be, but even 1% of a true god can still cause so much devastation. I was lucky enough to contain the shadow in my key, but there's one problem. The distortion. It is slowly seeping out of the key of reality, affecting it, all those around it, and soon, me. I objected, saying the distortion couldn't affect me, and it seems like it was only able to change non-sentient beings. Yes, that is true, but we've had our keys for so long that they've basically become a part of us. We may be sentient, though our keys are not, and if they become distorted, so could we. My mind will most likely be the first thing to be affected. And if the shadow does take control of my mind, there might be no stopping me. And inevitably, true fear will be released by my own doing. But should we find out if there's a way to stop it? We might not have time to figure that out, as I'm unsure how long it would take for my mind to become warped. I cannot simply abandon my key and give that burden to an innocent person. That is why I must leave. I'm going to use my powers to travel to the farthest point of the multiverse I can reach before I completely change. I need you to promise me something, though. I'm looking at you, Butler. When I return, I most likely won't be back for good intent, and I probably won't be alone either. So, when you see that I've gotten close to the Crimson Kingdom, I need all of you to use your power to summon an army. An army consisting of the strongest and worthiest warriors throughout the entire multiverse. Don't waste your time trying to hold me down and save me. Take my life if you have to. Save not only the Crimson Kingdom, but also the rest of reality. I can't take my own life, and I can't let you take it right now. As for one, that would mean the key of reality will be stuck with you. And if I end my own life in a farther part of the multiverse, then that means the key will surely become another person's problem. I must take this burden. My brother interrupted. But how will that change anything? If we take your life in that faithful battle, then the key will still become our problem. Hopefully not. What? My leave will hopefully give you the time you need to find a solution. The shadow will most likely be out of the key by then. So, focus on finding a way to either defeat or contain the shadow. Don't focus on trying to save me. Focus on trying to save reality. But we've already contained him. Can't we just put him back in True Fear's door? That would be suicide for the multiverse. For one, we'd have to open the door to put the shadow back in, and I don't think True Fear will simply let us crack the door ajar for a shadow. If that door even just cracks open, then True Fear will overpower us and squirm his way out. Secondly, even if we did find a way to put the shadow back in True Fear's prison without opening the door, what would be stopping it from coming out again? I'm leaving you to give you the time the distortion may not. We can't take any chances. It may seem foolish, but we can't let fate determine our victory. Farewell, my friends. And remember, the fate of reality is in your hands. He left shortly after, and for 500 years we've been anxious ever since. The researcher was able to keep an eye on KUVERA, and it turns out he was right. Throughout these 5 centuries, we've seen the Traveling King walk down different realities and slowly become more and more violent. And as of now, he's finally making his way back, faster than ever, destroying everything in his path and building his forces of fear. We have to act now. We've yet to find a solution. Nothing seems to work, but we have to fight to protect the Crimson Kingdom. We have to gather our own army to protect the multiverse. We have to give it all we've got. We can't have this war between universes head to its climax.